It's the Soft Issues podcast with Way, Matt, Lee and Ev. Are you sitting comfortably? This week we talked to Matthew Sowter, aka Saffron Frameworks, about frame building, weight weenies, and Matt's extensive collection of trombones.
So, like for orchestral, more classical applications, you tend to have bigger instruments that have a higher copper content relative to zinc. Where if you're doing like a pop gig, where everything's mic'd up and you've got to, be able to play over Ev, who's just like cranked his amp up to 11 on his guitar, and he's just going,
why would I do that?
Then you need a sound that can like cut at a higher frequency. So the higher the zinc, like when you get materials like sterling silver, which are really piercing, they can be quite good for like those sorts of applications. So it's like bikes, really. They're tools to do jobs.
So silver is a more rigid metal than copper. Then
Copper's very soft. So depending on what you put into the alloy, you can have different characteristics, and you can make different parts of the instrument out of different things. So I mean, this is getting super nerdy. But there's a saxophone player who none of you will have heard of called Michael Brecker. He's like the most recorded musician of all time. Like played with Shaka Khan in the 80s, like all that kind of stuff. There's a gig like Paul Simon, Central Park, 1991. There's like 150,000 people in Central Park, and they're all listening to Mike Brecker play the saxophone. He had this like brass saxophone with a sterling silver crook, and that gives it a different kind of resonance in a different area of the instrument. So softness of the brass, the kind of cutting of the silver at the top, you can create different characteristics, and the way the metal vibrates in different parts of the instrument can contribute to what kind of trying to sound you're trying to make, basically. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can customize with it.
So what's yours then?
So mine, I got a few. So the one that I play.
Oh, hold on, back up. You've got a few
trombones. I don't play the saxophone. I play the trombone.
Sorry, trombone.
I've got a few, yeah.
But we're talking about a trombone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've got a few. So
what's
the one
that, 3?
At its worst, I had 7. They all did different.
Bikes,
it's like bikes.
This is exactly like bikes.
Yeah. They all do different jobs, though. This is how you justify it, right? So I was a bit of a hoarder for like vintage stuff, and that I would have customized in certain ways. So the one I played the most was made in the Bronx in America in around about, I want to say 1937, 38. So it was like really old. I got it on eBay. Some bloke shipped it over from America. I think I paid like 600 quid for it.
What's your address again?
Oh, this was like I lived in Greenwich at the time, actually. So I lived above a tattoo shop in Greenwich, and like all these old vintage instruments would go to the tattoo shop, and they were like, "What is this?" I was like, "Please give me that box."
You have a dark, mysterious past. I didn't know about.
I was a bit of a hoarder for like vintage brass instruments, and the one I played was like late 1930s, made in New York in the Bronx by a guy called Vincent Stronnenbach, or Vincent Bach as he cut his name down. He was I think he was an Austrian immigrant after World War I, set up he was a trumpet player, made a business out of making brass instruments, moved from Europe to New York after World War I, and made some of the best brass instruments that were kind of ongoing. I customized a little bit. I changed, so the way you actually hold it, there's like a brace where you kind of manipulate the slide, and I didn't like the fact that it was quite thick, so I had a thinner one put on, just like stuff like that, just to make it feel like nicer. So it's like kind of like bar tape, really, is your contact point. Some people like really thick bar tape, some people like really thin bar tape.
Or a saddle.
Yeah, saddle, exactly that.
What we've been faffing around today.
Exactly. So
is saddles.
And I experiment with like different slide sections on different bells and like different like bore diameters and all this kind of stuff. And
So the bore diameter of the trumpet.
Yeah, so the bore diameter of the actual instrument gives you, so the wider the bore, the more sonorous and like dark and deep the tone.
Yeah.
But
it's more high pitched, like a little recorder or something.
Yeah, so the smaller the bore, like obviously the narrower the diameter, so the easier it is to play higher frequencies. Okay. So the air has like less of a kind of channel to kind of get through, and it resonates, kind of, it flows through. The frequencies are faster.
It's like whistling.
Yeah, exactly that. So you manipulate your tongue to whistle different pitches and change the aperture of your kind of what we call embouchure to whistle at different pitches. It's the same thing with an instrument. So, but even like a change from like so the one I kind of had was like a dual bore, so it was smaller on the top and it got wider as it went around. So it was like conical bore, like a cornet, like an old shepherd's crook cornet. So the difference between like
What's that?
So it's a conical bore instrument is where it gets progressively, the bore diameter gets progressively wider, bigger as you go around the instrument.
And it twists like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like the old brass band stuff, basically.
Okay.
Like,
And that's the shape of a brass instrument where you got, and eventually
exactly.
you get this.
It's pretty rudimentary stuff, to be honest. It's basically just a metal pipe that gets a bit wider as you go through. But the difference between like playing a 0.485 of an inch to 0.491 of an inch.
What's that in modern terms?
Don't know.
Okay.
I don't do maths, mate. But the difference between that kind of diameter is noticeable in the way that the air behaves and the kind of the feedback you get from the instrument. So you go from like something which is what I used to play, which is like somewhere between 0.85 and 0.5 of an inch to go up to like 0.547. The difference is huge. It's like going from riding like your race bike with 25mm tires to a gravel bike with 50mm tires.
Right. Okay.
The difference is that large.
Yeah.
How did we get onto this?
I don't know. You just started talking.
Welcome to Soft Issues.
So
this week's episode.
So we're having a hiatus from bikes this week and talking about the bore of brass instruments.
I find it. Have you ever tried playing a bike frame? Because there is
Can't
somebody,
say I have, to be honest.
there is somebody out there who like plays. Who will is like a.
What, are they hitting it? They're hitting it like
No,
drums?
they're blowing it.
They're blowing it.
They're blowing it. They put a what do you call the
Mouthpiece.
mouthpiece? What do you call the mouthpiece? It's called a mouthpiece. And they've done bike frames and basically anything, old bits of pipe and.
You're gonna have to send me a link to this.
I'm going to find it. I will find it.
I've heard of people playing vegetables.
You were.
I think that's a completely different. I don't know what
there
kind
is
of,
a vegetable orchestra in London, and what they like bore out vegetables, so things like carrots, other kind of vegetables which you can drill a hole in, put their mouthpieces in it, and jobs are good.
Fresh vegetables or dried vegetables?
Oh, fresh.
Fresh.
Yeah, fresh.
But dried vegetables would. That's not my.
Sorry,
That's
bike
an
fitter
Allen key
tools just
dropping out of Wade's pocket there.
standard.
That's more of something like maracas, like, and people would play the gourd, wouldn't they? They'd grow a gourd, dry it, and then leave the seeds in, and then eventually when it dries out, the seeds become a kind of rattle.
Yeah.
Like a pumpkin or
Yeah, exactly.
a calabash.
Or if you're super bougie, a pomegranate.
Yeah.
Have you played a pomegranate?
Can't say I have.
Aspirations, man.
Aspirations, yeah.
Aspirations.
I never got to that level.
Stick to your brass.
Yeah, stay in your lane.
So I guess going from trombone metallurgy to bicycle metallurgy is the link that we want to use here.
Yeah, but it makes sense, right? So like, the different materials produce different characteristics, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, Matthew, when you're making a bike, like, even down to like, steel isn't just steel, right? So, what tubing you use, like, all these different characteristics, how it's crimped, how it's kind of like, put together, these go into what makes a bike, right? So it's very similar, very different, but very similar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a bit about mixing frame materials in a previous podcast, and where was there any validation in kind of putting carbon and steel or carbon and aluminium and all these kind of things? And
So that bike over there is a good example of it. It's a mix between stainless steel, carbon fiber, and carbon steel. And the idea of the stainless steel around the chainstays, it seems to be slightly more rigid in comparison to carbon steel chainstay.
Is it generally stiffer?
It feels generally stiffer, but
even
if you
at the same
but
wall diameter or wall thickness, I should say.
So actually, the wall thicknesses are slightly thinner on the stainless steel XCR tubes, but as far as the data goes, they are exactly the same as a carbon steel tube. So I'm not sure exactly where that feel comes from, but actually just working with the material, that's kind of the feeling that I get out of it.
That's interesting.
And then the seat stays, top tube and down tube, are carbon steel, but with a mix of different stuff. So Columbus HSS, some Columbus Kirin Spirit,
Nice.
and some Columbus Life in the top tube, which is octagonal top tube. The head tube and the bottom bracket are stainless steel. That's generally areas where water is going to pool, so it's corrosion resistant. So it's kind of for the longevity of the frame. And then carbon fiber for the integrated seat tube. It cuts down a bit of weight and gives you a little bit of comfort.
What's it like?
Nice.
What's it like welding stainless to carbon steel? Is there a learning curve there, or is it just generally?
It's pretty straightforward. So the majority of bikes, that bike is TIG welded, and it's a little bit more tricky TIG welding stainless steel and carbon steel together. One kind of like spits out at you a little bit. But all the bikes that we make now are fillet brazed. And even if I'm working with carbon steel, I fillet braze with a low percentage of silver. So it's done at a super, super low temperature, at like 620 degrees. And so amalgamating two different materials together, like carbon steel and steel, it's
Not a problem when you've
it's no
got low
problem.
temperatures.
It just runs smoothly.
Cool.
I love that explanation of all these different elements that go into a bike frame, but they're just, normally people just look at the paint job and they're just like, oh, it's a steel bike. Steel is steel is steel.
Exactly.
Well, it could be. I mean, if you told somebody that was carbon without looking at the chainstays, when it's painted, these days the styling and everything, and the kind of like,
And the shape of the
shapes,
tubes will tell you that. And especially if it's fillet braze, because then you have
and you
that
don't see
amalgamation.
wells and,
It's a smoother transition from tube to tube.
Do you prefer one way of welding, or like fillet brazing as opposed to TIG welding?
I prefer fillet brazing. It's softer and gentler, and you work in a lot lower temperatures, so you put in less stress into the areas that you're welding. So you're not with silver at about 620 degrees, which is the melting point. When that material that you're welding onto or joining together, so not the filler metal, with fillet brazing, it's done at a higher temperature, so 200 and odd degrees more. And when it cools down, it actually anneals the material, because it cools down at a very, very sort of slow rate. If it's TIG welding, it makes the area a little bit brittle because of the super high temperature and the sort of very quick cooling. But the silver done at like 620 degrees, 650 degrees, it doesn't seem to have any effect of annealing or making the metal brittle. But for me, fillet brazing with silver is almost like a meditative process.
It's a more peaceful process, isn't it? Than
it's
setting
very
up the TIG
peaceful.
welder and having this just flash going on and having to, wear a mask and instead of just a pair of sunglasses, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at like 620 degrees, I don't wear anything.
Oh, right, okay.
My eyes are pretty fucked.
I was going to say,
Decisions have consequences.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Still got them though.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Well, I mean, I haven't got arc eye, and arc eye is something that you get from TIG welding. It's such a bright light. But it flows like butter.
Yeah.
And there's something lovely and fluid about the process of fillet brazing for me.
There's something to be said about that, maintaining your longevity by being sensible around the methods that you use.
Yeah.
And maybe choosing like fillet brazing over TIG welding. Because of that, maybe wear sunglasses, but but generally just for your own health, to do you want to be still doing this in 20, 30 years' time?
Yeah, I'm too old for that. Literally, I'm too old now to do it in 30 years' time.
Is there a practical application where one method would be better than another, though, if a customer came to you with a certain brief for a bike?
Yeah, if they want to cut down weight, sure. From a fillet brazed frame, just in general terms, you're saving like 100 grams from a fillet braze with bronze in comparison to TIG welding a frame.
Okay. So it's not nothing.
So it's not nothing, and the marketing out there, everything is supposed to be like super lightweight.
How does that affect your business?
The super lightweightness.
It's just everyone's a weight weenie, and they don't know why they're a weight weenie.
They're aware they're weight weenies because like the cycling media says that your bike needs to be light.
Yeah.
Because you're going to go faster up a hill, which, I mean, kind of makes sense. But how many people are actually racing up a hill?
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's always we want to be like the pros. They can't. People are always like, "Oh, I saw a pro do this," and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, that's their job. They do that." You don't do that. You don't race. You don't do grand tours or whatever, or even one-day races or whatever. It's a completely different ethos. Do you want to enjoy riding your bike or not?
What we should really be looking at is what do the pros ride after they've retired and they have the choice of being able to ride whatever they want.
Well, if you're Alberto Contador, then a super light carbon race.
Well, he built a whole brand for himself.
Yeah, but again, he's selling bikes, and that's why.
Yeah,
he's riding those bikes. So, but
well, he could have been like David Miller and decided to sell
Bromptons.
Ride Bromptons up.
Incredibly expensive Bromptons. But it's if you're selling steel bikes, it's just like it's this kind of like head in the hands moment when everybody wants to know how much something weighs. They want to know. Wheels are the same. When I sell people wheels, they're always asking like. For some reason, people are really. Fixated on how much the individual components weigh, despite that not really being relevant to it. It's like how much does a rim weigh? It doesn't matter.
But is there something to be said that there's a rotational weight, and keeping that rotational weight down as low as possible if you are. And I'm kind of going against what I sell, but if you're trying to go up a hill as quick as possible, that quick acceleration, there's a benefit, but it doesn't really make much difference if you're on the flat because you lose that momentum of that weight of that wheel going forward.
Actually, a heavier
wheel.
I suppose there's that trend. Crit racers who are mainly doing flat stuff. Like really deep wheels, they like, or obviously track. You see it's either full discs on the track for pursuit, or just really deep wheels because they want that rotational weight.
Which is most of the riding in England, really.
Yeah, basically.
Do you think people come and buy, say, your Saffron frames, more for that explanation of your love of Philip brazing? Like they come for that idea, that process, that feeling that you have, that you kind of ingrain into your frame, rather than I just want to get the latest whatever SL8 that's just come out and so on. I feel like the custom bike customer has probably got a different agenda.
We've got a different agenda, but we are fighting against the mass media of the bike. It needs to be aerodynamic and as light as possible. And so generally people that come and buy a custom bicycle for us, they're not cheap. The average cost of a bike is 10 grand or just over. And so it's a considerable purchase. Someone's not going to do that at like their first bike, or sometimes make it their only bike. They usually have a couple of bikes in their stable. And sometimes what we are finding with like a lot of riders, especially from Southeast Asia, they've got like an array of, factor bikes and Pinarellos and so on and so forth. But they want something that is different, that is unique to them. I also think what we're selling is the connection to the person that makes this thing for you. It's having that association with it.
Yeah, like getting a suit made. It's always the usual kind of comparison. Having you can walk into Marks and Sparks and buy yourself a decent enough suit off the peg. It's just not going to be the same as having someone who's having a tailored experience. Yeah. But does the same exist for musical instruments?
Yeah.
Too. People will customize. I don't know. It's not purely just practical, is it?
Yeah, I think like.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but sure, like there is that connection with with the builder and the designer that you get in by getting a custom bicycle, but there's a massive practical element as well. Potentially there's something will fit you perfectly, so your contact points. If you've been for a good fitment,
very good.
Just throw those in there for a little bit of marketing.
Yeah.
So to be able to get on the bike and it fits you perfectly, but also to have the bike handle of how you would like it to handle.
Yeah.
Which, I can make those adjustments in 5 minutes within the designing process of your bike. And you can't walk into, I don't know, a specialized concept store and get that from the latest SLA.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I have to take what
No, I was just going to ask, and you made an interesting point there, is like how much of your kind of like consultation process. So if someone comes to you with an idea of what they want for a bike, how much is that of you kind of like educating that customer as like, okay, this is what you have in mind, but in reality, this is what it's going to be like. This, why not kind of think about this? How much is that kind of like process a part of what it is that you kind of do to get to that end of building that frame, and how kind of far do you sometimes have to go to kind of convince people that what they're doing might not be what is best for them?
Yeah. I think like when I set out, I set out with two intentions of people that I would like to work with, and sometimes I have gone to the extreme of this, but if somebody just comes to me and they say, well, this is exactly what I want, build it. I have turned down some orders with customers that come with that kind of approach. But then on the same breath, if somebody just says, here's some cash, build me something, I don't particularly want to go down that route. So traditionally, over the last 10 years or 11 years, I've worked with people that it is a collaborative process. And so it's kind of touching on what your question is. I play a lot of the devil's advocate, a little bit of challenging and a lot of explaining, and just presenting different opportunities by using different angles, measurements, different types of tubes, different types of components to get the bicycle feeling the way that they want it to feel. So it's very much a collaboration process. And there's a lot of playing the devil's advocate in a very kind way, because generally our market is males, sadly, between the age of like 40 and 60. And generally it's not their first bike, and they've been riding for a fair period of time. And it's a male macho thing. You kind of come in with like this bravado. I know this, I know that, I know this, blah, blah, blah. And so it's playing that devil's advocate in a very open and sort of non-judgmental manner.
Sounds exactly like bike.
It sounds very familiar.
Sounds like every industry. Really.
But yeah, it's just listening to that process is really heartening, I guess.
Sorry, go on, Wayne.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, what is super interesting is that you can be too specific as well as too vague. It's just as bad as each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a personal preference for me.
But it makes sense though, right? It's like, if you're like too far to the extreme in anything, it's difficult to kind of collaborate on something. Yeah, for sure.
And it is a collaboration, because I want the person who is commissioning the bike to feel a part of it. And I want the person to feel valued in the choices that they make, even though I may be guiding them a little bit down a particular road, and maybe that is just by showing them the difference, positive and negative, to a particular thing.
And you want to feel valued too.
Yeah, sure.
And that's kind of, you're touching on the same thing that we've talked about this and constantly talking about. And the older you get and the more experienced you are in something and the longer you've been doing something, the more opportunity you have to turn people down. Because I find that as well, is like more and more, there's a certain brand of individual that I'm just like, there's nothing I can do for you. I don't want to do something for you because you don't really have the right attitude. You're not valuing what I do. So when somebody comes along that does really value what you do and they're kind of willing to listen, that's just, it's fantastic to have that kind of customer.
I think it's because you know that once they're invested into whatever process you go through, whatever education you want to put them through, then they'll just get so much more out of it. Like you enjoy your riding more, you enjoy, the process of having this beautiful kind of bike made for you and your particular goal. And I think that's where the real value of all of these processes, whether it's getting bikes made or wheels made or getting your body positioned in the best way possible and marrying all those, that's where the magic happens, where you marry everything together and you get an amazing riding bike that handles in a certain way, and it's kind of your weight distribution is right on it and it feels good and you can generate good power and you're comfortable, and that's the magic of it all.
It's a learning experience, and unfortunately there's a lot of there are a lot of media channels out there that are kind of stunting that the opportunity to educate people in the right way around things like that, because the marketing aspect and the kind of profit making aspect is,
I think it's just not for everybody. Not everybody wants to go through this kind of process of educating, learning, and developing. So you can go
waiting.
What's your current lead time?
Good things come to those who.
There's a certain lead time where, if somebody says that they can do something in a couple of weeks, I'm like, oh, now I'm suspicious. That's too quick. and of course, and then you've got like really, really long waiting times. But if somebody, if a frame builder or a wheel builder or someone is really popular, and you're usually because you're a one person, kind of business, you have to wait for these things. It's worth it.
So our waiting list is at 12 months, and it's too long, I feel. But through COVID times, like we've had some builds that someone's been waiting for like 2 years for the availability of components.
Components is a huge one, isn't it? You might have tubing, and you could build a frame in a couple of days, but then you've got to wait for
all the bits and pieces to come into stock.
May 2024 was something. I was looking something up the other day, and it was like, okay, that person's.
It's mad, isn't it?
Perhaps I should offer you an alternative.
Or like there's usually just no date available. Product.
That's
it's just it will come at some point in the future, maybe, possibly. But
it's difficult if you've promised somebody something, isn't it? And then
exactly.
They're kind of like, oh, okay, it's going to be this build, but you have to, and the email chains and the admin and stuff like that is a pain, isn't it?
But that's another thing as well about being like a custom bespoke manufacturer, is like the correspondence and the admin time. It's not just about building a frame, is it? It's about communication, the constant communication throughout the process, and things happen. That chain set, that rear mech might suddenly disappear off the face of the earth, and then. What do you got? So that's time as well, right? So, as a frame builder, you're not just building frames, you're communicating, you're running a business, you're trying to ride your bike, do all this other stuff, and it's a lot.
And again, going back to customers that you like and people who respond well to things, they will be understanding. You can see someone coming a mile away, can't you, when you know that, I'm going to have to give them bad news and they're just going to kick up a fuss or something. Sometimes, there are people that are just the ideal. I've got a guy who I keep kind of having to email him going, oh, that thing isn't installed. How about this or how about that? It's like, yeah, fine. Just put it on the bill. Just put it on the bill. It's great, but not everyone's like that. Sometimes
that's true. And like I understand the frustration with delays of getting things. Because I appreciate
people
it.
are so excited. I know that I ordered something on Amazon the other day, and it was next day delivery. And when it didn't come the next day, I was so unreasonably irate. I was like, I had to stop and calm myself and be like, you know what? People used to have to trek across country to.
We used to have to go and get it.
I know. We used to have to go to Argos and stand in a queue.
Yeah, exactly. The world's got mad.
But I found through COVID, and it's been really difficult because of what you're talking about, the availability of components. The importance of customer service now is, I feel like the learning process of the last 2 years, our customer service is a lot better. Yeah. And I think like the key ingredient to that is setting expectations from like the onset. Bad expectations, good expectations, playing the devil's advocate. It's really important from doing that from the day one. Yeah. And so when stuff's not in stock, you kind of go, well, we've had this chat a couple of months ago.
Yeah. It's not your fault. It's not your responsibility to, you don't make group sets, you don't make handlebars, you don't make whatever.
You don't make bicycle tubing either.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find that your customers, for lack of a better word to describe it, just they're already sold by the time they come to you and have a consultation, or is there, do you have a consultation to figure out if this is the right thing for them, as it were?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So historically, I have had a consultation with the customer before them getting on board and paying a deposit, and sometimes those consultations would be 3 hours in the workshop just chatting.
Wow.
At extreme levels. Yeah. Or it would be generally people in different time zones. It would be emails backwards and forwards. Yeah. And sure, not everyone decides to go ahead because we don't have any pricing structure, and we really do. This is a really bad business decision, but we start with a blank canvas with every single bicycle that we make. And so we can't like say, well, this is our mixed material of what my bike is, of carbon steel and stainless steel. It's got X price to it. It's like we've got over 2,000 tubes to choose from, different pricings to it, different dropouts, all this kind of stuff, and different costs of paint. That we can't say, well, this is how much it is. So you have to go through the quotation process to figure out what's best for them to make the correct decision. And then sometimes you realize that, like, wow, a day's gone.
Yeah.
And like, who's going to pay me for that day?
And you can't operate any other way, can you? It's really difficult.
So we changed things about 8 months ago, maybe six months ago, the transition between 8 and 6. But so what we do now is we get an inquiry in, and it's very standard, and it probably goes against of what we offer of a custom bicycle, of having anything that you want. But we have a standard email of talking about the process as well as a price guide, and it's a really long, extensive list. And we kind of say, well, we will have a 15-minute telephone call with you, or you can come in 15 minutes, but we keep it to that. And if you'd like to go ahead, there's a deposit. And then we will start discussing the build, because at some stages, there was like 30% of inquiries that were coming in that were turning into orders. And you can imagine on the extreme end of like a day being just like disappearing into nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't help with making money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can't make money, then you can't help people. So you have to kind of see those business decisions as part of the process of helping people out and just committing to stuff and making stuff happen. So.
It sharpens people's focus as well. If they know they have 15 minutes with you, you better have a list of questions.
Yeah.
And you better be like certain about what you want to get from that 15 minutes.
But also that 15 minutes is also for me to hear if they're the right person for me to
it's a two-way process,
with.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And also if we can fulfill what they want.
Yeah.
Because sometimes like I can't. And that's okay.
Yeah, you're vetting your customer as much as your customer is vetting you, for sure.
And that's the ideal way to run a small business, is to not be desperate for money, which is a shame because that's the way the world works. But to be able to pick and choose, so that you can recommend another frame builder, or you can recommend that somebody go here or there, and then you build this network and you build relationships with other people in the industry. And I found that in this industry there are a few people who are quite closed to collaborations or even just communication, because they're afraid. I've been independent. I've been sole trader for, with the exception of the last few years, for like 25 years or something. And especially when you're starting out in an industry, you have a fear of like, I need all the work. Everybody needs to come to me for this stuff. And then the longer you do it, the more you're a bit more confident in your abilities and you're a bit more confident in your product. You're willing to actually hand over. You realise that there's actually a benefit to kind of almost sharing the load.
Absolutely, and especially that sort of secretiveness was very much apparent when I started frame building. Most people were self-taught, or they were taught by one other person, and it's secretive, even though it's a pretty simple process making a bicycle frame. And sure, there
are YouTube videos. I learned to weld yesterday in about 7 minutes.
It's as complicated as you want to make it, isn't it, really?
It's quite simple to make just a frame, but to do it well, it takes an element of skill.
Like
sure.
Being a musician, it's easy to get a sound out. Well, maybe not on a trombone, but you can sit at a piano and you can play a key, and you can play a melody, but then being exceptional at something, that's what takes practice. That's what takes,
Wouldn't know, mate.
No. I really want to hear you play trombone.
Yeah, can you bring your trombone?
Yeah, we've got another 5 minutes.
Not. Absolutely not. No one needs to hear that. But it's that power of saying no, isn't it? Like.
Yeah, look, I don't want to give the impression that I'm just turning people away.
No, it's not the case. But in certain instances,
I'm definitely not as selective as.
Please don't hesitate in sending your inquiries. Yeah, but it is that power in like sometimes saying no, and there's a lot to be said for that. I think for sure.
I mean, we spend all day talking to people about different choices and so on. There's always
saying no.
Yeah.
No, you can't have that saddle. It's not right for you.
But actually, I've been running for a very long time, and I've been for a very large amount of fits, and I don't think I've ever come across somebody who, like you, who has kind of been kind of open. Well, maybe this won't work, maybe this won't work, maybe you may not find a saddle that works perfectly for you, maybe you need to work on your body type thing.
I don't know, it's scary, I think, for a lot of people having choice. They're like, I thought I came to you to get a prescription. But so this is kind of the managing expectations again. We might not be the best fitters for a lot of people because it's going to be hard work. It's going to be demanding. You're going to have to make choices.
All this money, Wade. Fix me.
You pay money to get like the best advice, I guess.
It works just exactly the same in the bike mechanic industry. Bike mechanics they're a breed unto themselves, and there are so many, especially the younger ones. They're so afraid of saying that they don't know. They're so afraid of admitting that, something's new. We were in the workshop yesterday and looking up some new Dura-Ace thing. Like, and everyone's huddled around the computer going, it works like that now, does it? But having that ability to even at our age, I imagine we're fairly similar ages, we have the same amount of grey in our beards.
Fair point. Yours is concentrated in a particular area.
Yeah, it's that's why I shave the sides of the hair.
Is that a thing? Like, do you look at other people's beards and go, yeah.
It's like carbon dating, isn't it?
So it was like cutting a tree in half.
Counting the rings.
I get a lot of compliments. I don't know why on the beard. It's weird. Kind of want to shave it off
because it's a good beard.
Thank you very much. I think. Thank you. I appreciate yours. I mean, you don't have the bald spots here that I
No, I
have.
don't. No. Way more hair growth.
This is going to work really well on the podcast.
We'll have to do put some pictures up on the Instagram or
Some
something.
mug shots.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
It's that thing that realizing that sometimes you don't have all the answers.
Sometimes you don't have all the
that's
answers,
okay.
and that's okay. And you can say to a customer, "Look, I don't know what the problem is here. Let's find out together."
Exactly.
And that way, the customer gets an education as well. Because if you have somebody who's experienced in a field, and you get to witness them teaching themselves, learning something, that to me is more powerful than just telling somebody how something works. To watch somebody's thought process. I always find that interesting when I watch you guys work, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, you came. Okay, you've gone down that route now. I find that interesting about people and how they manage themselves and manage their own knowledge.
The more you know, the more you realise you don't know.
Enough about butts. Oh, thanks, Matt.
Cool.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Coming in and
Nice
spending
chatting.
all morning with us.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the fit. I'm very keen to see how that saddle helps
Sound
my
goes, yeah.
kid producing abilities.
It's just the start of the journey, Matthew.
Trombones, fascinating. You can find out more about Matt's bikes at saffronframeworks.com. Join us on Instagram @SoftIssuesPod. And as always, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.